नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ प्रोफेशनल लर्निंग में आपका स्वागत है।
What are some of the other color correction tools that we can make use of here inside Photoshop? Well, as I say, there's a lot of them. Let me get you started with one called Vibrance. They're all, of course, found underneath the Adjustments submenu. Go ahead and look for Vibrance. Very much like Brightness Contrast, we have just two sliders inside this Vibrance dialog box. Once again, just make sure that your preview is turned on so we can get an idea of what's going to happen here. So the Vibrance slider, what that's going to do is that's going to kind of crank up the richness of the colors inside the image. Something like I'm getting here, you can see the greens are really starting to come out inside this image. Again, if you want that before and after view or idea here, just check and uncheck your preview checkbox there. Okay, so there's the Vibrance slider there. I could reduce the amount of vibrance until I wind up with something like this, a very dreary kind of drab image, which who the heck knows? Maybe that's what you're after. Maybe there's some kind of a special effect that you're looking for. Okay, so maybe I'll kind of pump up my vibrance a little bit. And then saturation, the amount of color that I want inside my image. I could certainly oversaturate an image, or I could set my image to be undersaturated. If I crank this guy all the way to the left, wouldn't you know it, we're now into the world of black and white photography. So if you're wondering how you can take an image and convert them to a black and white photo, there are many, many different ways to do that inside Photoshop. Here's one very simple method. Okay, just dragging down this saturation slider. Okay, so you can have a lot of fun with this guy. Go ahead, knock yourself out. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to cancel this guy out, though, because I'm going to show you another command that you may want to make use of. Now, this starts to get a little bit more heavy duty in terms of the color correction tools that we have inside Photoshop, but I'm going to show them to you anyway. This guy is called Levels, okay? So Image, Adjustment, and then down to Levels. All right, this is what we get here, a much more complex dialog box, as you can see here. What's the deal with this guy? Well, in the center of the Levels dialog box, we have a graph. This graph or grid is actually what's referred to as a histogram. And here's how a histogram works. It measures the lightest and the darkest pixels inside your image. So way over on the left-hand side, we have solid black. Way over on the right-hand side, the opposite side, we have solid white. And in the middle, of course, we have gray. And the height of these fellas here tell us the number of pixels at each of those sort of points on the histogram. So you can see here way over on white, there's a bar that goes almost up to the very top of the grid. That's all the white areas that I have inside the image. Okay, so what I can do with this guy is I can start to monkey with these sliders here. I could take all of the pixels that are sitting towards sort of the left side of the histogram, and I could drag them towards the right. See the result that we're getting there. What I'm doing is I'm shifting more colors into solid black. And I told you this was a little bit more complex. So basically what I'm saying is any pixels from this point over to the left should be solid black. So as I'm dragging towards the right, more and more colors are being thrown into shadow, if that makes sense. More and more pixels are being reassigned to be solid black, if that makes sense. Okay? Or darker colored pixels. Now, I could do the opposite as well. I could say, all right, let's take some of the lighter pixels and shove them towards the darker side. Okay? So now what I'm doing is I'm pushing more of the colors away from the white point and into the dark areas. Okay? So usually with something like this, I might come in here and just make a few minor adjustments, kind of tug things either way, something like this, until it starts to look a little bit reasonable. Maybe I'll move this center slider just a little bit back and forth until, it looks half decent, something like this. Another trick with these dialog boxes as well is I can hold down Alt or Option and notice what happens to my cancel button. It changes to a reset button. So I can reset the dialog box and I can always go back to where you and I started. Okay. Another option that I could do is I could make use of the auto button, which we saw earlier. So I could press auto there, and Photoshop's going to give me its best guess in terms of the settings that I should use inside the Levels dialog box for this particular image. Okay. All right. Now, the Levels command is, as I say, very complex. There's a lot more to it than what I'm talking about here, but I think I'm going to leave well enough alone because I don't want to blow your brains out too badly here. You could certainly make use of this guy. I think he's a great command to use to at least get started in a more advanced direction for your color correction. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cancel this guy out because there's one more command that I want to show you. This command I think may fall into the special effects category, but what the heck, let's get into it. I'm going to go image and then down to adjustments. There's a command in here called photo filter. Go ahead and grab this guy. And as his name would imply, we can apply a filter, a color filter on top of our photograph. So the default here is a warming filter. So now the image is kind of warmed up and it has almost sort of this orange overlay applied to it. I can adjust the density of the overlay. I could crank that up, something like this, or I could reduce the effect, reduce the photo filter, something like that. Okay? Now, there's tons of filters that you and I can go and apply. Lots of warming filters that we could make use of. Some cooling filters as well to try and cool the image off a little bit. We could get into specific colors, violets, magentas, blues, greens, all the rest of it. You can really have some fun here, down into some emeralds and so on. Okay? Or what we could do is we could go color, and I could click on this little color block, and that brings us into, wouldn't you know it, Photoshop's color picker, where we can go and choose a specific color ourselves. Maybe something like that is what I'm after. Okay, and then I could crank up the density on that guy. Okay, again, it kind of falls into the realm of special effects, but I thought I'd throw him in here because he's a pretty cool command. In any regard, if I'm happy with this, I would go ahead and click on OK. Now, I have to remind you that all the commands that we've seen in this exercise, levels, the photo filter, the vibrance, and in the previous exercise, the brightness contrast, these are all permanent, don't forget. They're all destructive. I've got to show you how you can color correct your images in a non-destructive way, and that's coming up in the next exercise.